October 2nd, 1969. Novosel and his crew had been flying for 7 hours when they received yet another mission.
We received the mission to go up to the Cambodian border. That's where the mission plotted out. And it was a flaky mission, if you will. By that I mean, we didn't know very much. All we know that we were needed up there. And I proceeded to go up there, rather chagrined because I thought my day was just about over after flying 7 hours, but now I had quite a few number of hours to go before I was through. What had happened was that we had a 3-company strike force attacking known Viet Cong positions. The intelligence evidently was in error, and the force that they were attacking was much stronger than they anticipated. The lead element was cut off, and the commander of troops decided to disengage. In other words, he retrograded. That's a fancy term for a retreat. And he left a group of soldiers that had been cut off to their own devices. And I was asked to go extricate, in other words, get them out of there if I could. All were wounded. We make 2 abortive attempts that failed, and of course every time that I'm down there at the surface to rescue these people, I'm met with machine gun fire and other fire from around the clock, so to speak. Since they're surrounded, the enemy is all around, they're able to fire at me. It required a different procedure from what we were doing. I decided to just skim along the ground with my helicopter, never stopping, in an area where I assumed, from the way the firing was going, where our friendly troops had to be. You can tell this by the way the firing pattern goes. And sure enough, I assumed the right position. And what we wanted to do was to have these wounded people stand up as I went by them real close, and then we would yank them on board, grab them by the wrist or whatever, and pull them on board while the enemy is still trying to get us. Well, it worked, and we loaded up the aircraft with about 8 or 9, maybe 10 people, and it's a Huey, and we can't hold very many more. Besides, the medic can't do any work on helping them with their wounds, and I'd take them to a special forces camp nearby. It's about a 10-minute flight. Drop them off, get some fuel, return. In other words, I did this 3 different times. I'd load up 9 or 10, take them to the special forces camp, get more fuel, and return. On my last pickup, one of my crewmen said that he sees apparently a friendly man waving a rag, but he's behind us. So the quickest way to get to him is for me to hover the helicopter backwards to his position and then have him pulled on board. But as we came to a halt to pick this man up, and as we yanked him on board, that's when a man stood up about 30 yards in front of me with his AK and emptied it at me personally. Part of a bullet hit my hand, which was on the stick, which caused the stick to go back, and another bullet projectile glanced off the rubber sole of my boot, so that it caused that leg to go in, causing the other leg to go out, pushing on the pedals. When you're doing this to a helicopter, you know, these are the controls. The nose goes off to one side, the nose goes way up, and we're about to crash, except that I have enough sense to pull on the power, which then raises me up. It keeps me from hitting the ground at this odd angle. The man that's being pulled on board now slips back out, but luckily for him, his legs straddle the skids, so he doesn't fall further. By the time we get him back on board, we're now 60 feet in the air, and my co-pilot got on the controls with me, and we got out of there.
In all, Novosel performed 15 extremely hazardous extractions and was credited with the saving of 29 lives.
The medal was presented to me by President Nixon in June of 1971. My son actually served with me in Vietnam. We flew a number of missions as pilot and co-pilot. So when I went home after the action, he wrote me a letter stating that I'd been recommended for the Medal of Honor. It's a most unusual situation. I suppose I'm the only man to receive the Medal of Honor who was informed initially by his son.
Throughout 1968, the number of dustoff missions increased dramatically. In just 12 days, during the Communists' January Tet Offensive, crews evacuated over 8,000 patients with only 64 helicopters, 40 of which were hit by enemy fire. By year's end, more than 200,000 wounded were recovered. Dustoff's commitment to recovering the wounded as fast as possible drove crews to log incredible flight hours, despite limited resources and personnel.
Generally speaking, our shifts were 12 hours, and it was conceivable that you would be flying almost all the time that you were on duty.
It's one mission after another, and you don't shut down. You refuel hot, and then you say, nurses, for God's sakes, give us some chocolate chip cookies or some chocolate milk, which was a great thing over there, and or a sandwich or something, and they would run out and stick a sandwich in the window as you dropped off the patients and went back out on the next mission.
Dustoff's ability to continue operating at such a pace was dependent on the skill and dedication of each team's crew chief. Damage from enemy fire and the strain of constant flying took a serious toll on dustoff Hueys. Overall, the cumulative stress of such frantic operations had a tremendous impact on the entire crew.